Mr. Wood, how
Yes,
are
ma'am.
you doing? Are you
I'm
ready?
I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready.
First, I just want to ask you kind of where did this come from? How did you get the inspiration for this whole thing?
This whole thing, this whole world. So, I am not the best sleeper at all. So, um, but one thing that I found outside of meditation, because I do meditate as well, that's very helpful. But um, telling myself like a story in my head, like whatever that might be, it could be something very simple or something elaborate. Um, really kind of seems to help. It like just gives me something to focus on aside from the not sleeping, and tell the main character of this trilogy, just he was like this character that would like kind of recur like over and over in different scenarios. um and I've had other ideas for projects like yet to come in that same like weird, it gets like really good like in that weird zone that's like between wakefulness and sleep. And it's just like people that come to me, like kinds of people or what they might look like or what kind of like makes them tick. Like the situations, the scenarios, like plot, that's all stuff that I kind of have to do separately. But it all started with him, the guy. So that's kind of where it came. And then I just like built stuff out from him.
So just from not being able to sleep.
Just from literally not being able to sleep.
That's interesting. So had you been a writer before?
Yeah, when I was a young person, I wrote quite a bit and a little bit in my 20s, but then, as kind of my alcoholism kind of ran away with me, it sort of became less and less important.
Oh
What a
yeah.
surprise. Even though like it brought me pleasure, that's kind of the ironic thing about it. As I moved into like my second, third, fourth year of recovery, because I've been doing it for about 10 years now, like I started to write more and more. And I did write a kind of like a lit fic novel um, around year 7, maybe. That I wasn't really pleased with so much, but it was just kind of like a warm up. Like, it's like, oh, I can like write a big piece, you know what I mean? Because I'd never done anything kind of that length.
A
And then
warm-up novel.
kind of a warm up. I mean, that wasn't the intention. I was like, I'm going to change the world with this, but I just wasn't pleased with it. And maybe, it's something I could go back to, but like I really, really wanted to write fantasy. And as I started to think about that and think about like, okay, like who's a fantasy hero, that's when in those sleepless moments, like Tell kind of started coming to me.
Okay. And you've got a trilogy
I
coming,
do.
right?
Yeah.
The second one's already out and you're working on the third one.
Second's out, third one in June. I can't remember the exact date, but it's late June.
So wow. So is it already basically done being written?
It is very close to being drafted but not entirely done. It's like right there though.
That makes me nervous.
It makes me nervous too, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
I believe you.
I had better. I just feel like it's a promise made, so I'm gonna try to do it. I won't put anything out again, to go back to earlier. Like I'm not gonna put anything out that will embarrass
Terrible.
me beyond what is totally unavoidable.
Yeah. I respect that.
Yeah.
It's for the fans, man.
For the
For the
fans, the 2s of 10s of them.
Hey, that beats my like 1. Nah, maybe 2. Maybe 2. So, all right. So set us up for this passage that you're going to read.
Yeah, sure. So this is pretty early. It's like the first scene of chapter 4. So just to set up, like Tell, this guy, he is the crown prince of a country called Fae, or he thinks he is. And he is overseas. He's about 40, and he spent like the last 20 years working for his father with this country called Omela. And they have been at war kind of like on and off for centuries. And so Tell has been trusted by his father to like come to some peace. So has been going back and forth across the ocean, back and forth for a long, long time. He's in this foreign land now, Omela, and they are like right at the point where they're going to finalize the treaty. And this takes place, in the days after they've signed it, after he's like completed this huge task. But right before that signing, he finds out that his father has died, his father, the king, and that his father's, kind of council of advisors called Table uh, has declared Tell of unsound mind and elevated his younger brother to the throne. So, he has this big achievement, and right at that moment, a couple of pieces of fairly devastating news, obviously. So he's grieving, but up until this point, kind of doesn't have an opportunity to do so because he's like, representing his country and signing a treaty and all of that stuff. So this is kind of what happens late at night when he finally has a moment to
All
think.
right, take it
Oh,
away.
take it away. I've never read my stuff aloud except
Are
to
you serious?
myself. Yeah, never.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
to myself for sure. But anyways, a short time after falling asleep the night before he sailed for Faye, Tell woke from a nightmare he could not remember. Uneasy, he sought to soothe his head by reminding himself he would soon return to Athos, where he could spend time with his father. Cursing his mind for his forgetting, the full weight of his losses fell upon him at last. He tried to return to sleep, but his exhaustion was so infused with anxiety and grief, he found it impossible to rest. Naked, he sat on his fine covers and tried to bring his mind low, to empty it so he might hear the goddesses and gods. He had been neglecting his meditation. Weaving a thread of magic fire between the fingers of his healing right hand, he could only hear his own dark, incessant chatter. Stillness of mind and body eluded him. Restless even in times of pleasure and ease, he could not force himself to stop thinking and moving. He dressed and marched the palace halls. He craned his neck at the canopy of stars over the Queen's garden. He read, or tried to read. His eyes aimed themselves at black markings on ivory paper, but in his distress, they conveyed no more meaning than the scratches left by a house cat on the leg of a table. When he forced himself to stay in bed, he spun the covers into damp knots. The thirst haunted him, stalking his every racing thought. It chased, it seduced and insulted. Now it was both too late and too early to begin drinking. He knew he must remain coherent for his last meeting with the Queen before boarding the Crunadam, and had no faith he would be able to stop once a single warming, relieving, quenching drop met his tongue. A quest for peace in liquid form would take him beyond sleep. Rest was what he needed, but not what he craved. Once he was on the ship, he would be free to drink for 3 weeks if the wind was kind, longer if it was hostile, or the other way around. His swift mind had always served him well. He was gifted with the ability to retain information, to see problems from many vantages, to sense without effort what situations required of him, to charm and seduce. His mother, and when she was gone, his father, had called him in tender moments my brightest boy. He knew, however, the nature of light is to cast shadow. This interior gloom had appeared along the fringes of his consciousness when he was halfway between boy and man. When the water took Fior and Hod, certain corners of his brain and heart were permanent dusk. Inside Faye's bright prince, less luminous, was the constant, concealed nervousness. Darker was the tendency of his busy mind to wander from him, to relive and re-examine moments triumphant and tragic, to fret without end about what had not yet occurred. Blacker was the urgent, ever-present drive to escape his own echoing skull. King Vith had, for a time after the loss of his queen, taken to drinking in the afternoons and evenings. It helped him to sleep through his most acute grief. Tell had joined him often in those months and found that mead and ale and apple wine chased the shadows back to the margins for a while. In recent years, much of his mental energy was consumed with a tense choreography. His mind danced with its own echo. One dancer stepped toward the drink, the other shuffled back. The second performer, of course, could only keep up the sequence for so long. He would tire. He was only an echo, a reflection. The first would lead them both across the floor to relief. The curtain would fall. The curtain would rise again. Agitated, tremulous, and slick with perspiration, Tell ignored the guard's knowing expression and sent for Turo long after midnight. The boy rushed across the palace to him. Youth's elasticity prevented the fact that he had been asleep from showing on his features. His wild hair betrayed it. He had pulled on some leggings and a slim tunic in a yellow that, in its paleness, was more Phaean than Omellan. There could be no mistaking the garment's cut for anything other than Omellan, with its massive scoop at the neck, lack of billows at the sleeves, and tight fit. Even in Tell's frazzled state, he could not help but notice Turo's raw maleness threatening to break the seams. I am lonely. I'm here, said Turo. He looked like he was trying to read the prince's face. I mean, Tell felt foolish. He was close to tears. I mean, I wanted company. All right, not all right. Tell swallowed. Would you spend some time with? Of course, I'm happy to see you. We both leave tomorrow. You and your comrades are off to compete against Hebites and Endowians. Yes, at Ilium. The Omellans will win. Turo appeared embarrassed. We'll do our best for Queen Sessa. You will win. I'm sorry about your father. I didn't hear until after the signing. Turo tamed his long blue hair with his fingers, tucking it behind his ears. I wouldn't have been so flirtatious if... I'm sorry about your father. I would like to listen to you talk about your farm. Of course, but you'll lie down. Will you lie down? That is not... I truly only want to listen to you, and I only want to talk, please. Turo swept his big open hand toward the bed. Tell did as he was asked. For over 2 hours, Turo described every detail of the land his parents worked. While much of the country was prone to summer drought, the region around the capital seemed to have the perfect amount of rain and warm air needed for growing fat citrus. The soil was rich and free of rocks. His family labored long and hard for the little they had, but were blessed. The nobles of the area were not of the greedy type. They were left alone to plant, harvest, trade, and enjoy their rectangles of dirt. Turo knew every tree, each pebble. He spoke in low, easy tones. A short time after he began, he took Tell's feet in his lap and rubbed them with his strong fingers. While Tell could not find sleep, he quieted. In a lull, Turo's head fell forward. He snapped it back up and continued talking. You should sleep, champion. It had been long enough since Tell had spoken that it came out a rasp. What about you? I will, eventually. Not tonight, but eventually, said Tell. They got out of the bed and padded to the door. Thank you. We will not see each other again. Turo frowned and kissed the tired prince. It was neither chaste nor wanton. And scene, as they say. I forgot to mention, it's kind of important. The book begins with Tell in bed. They're like waking up in the morning with this younger, hot athlete guy, Turo. So
Which is that guy, right?
that guy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. That was a great passage to read, I think.
Thank you.
Given the premise of the whole book. What I first noticed, well, I don't know if this is getting too deep too soon. I first noticed the feelings he's feeling because he can't have alcohol. So Tell is this, he was supposed to be king, but because he's an alcoholic, and I don't know if it's clear, but is it because he sleeps with men too, or is that
No,
that doesn't matter?
No, that doesn't matter.
It's
There's
just
no
the
homophobia in this particular fantasy world at
Okay.
all.
I didn't get that. I just wasn't sure.
I mean, for sure, one of the interesting contrasts between Faye and Omella is that Omella is a very kind of sexually like liberated place, and Faye is a little bit more reserved. So there may be some criticism that Tell sleeps around so much because he
That's what
does
it was
really a
then,
lot.
because
Yeah.
there was some kind of backhanded comment about it, and I wasn't sure if it was the gayness or just, you know, sleeping with somebody, the sex, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so because of his alcoholism, he is declared to be of unsound mind, and he cannot be king now. They have, while he's away, they have decided that. Now, he gives off, I read up a little beyond what you read of your novel. He doesn't seem to care that much. Like but there's something about him that does care. There's like this interesting dichotomy where like he does care about who rules and what happens to Faye, and he cares about the history, the lore, you know, he has a lot of reverence for the throne, it sounds like. But at the same time, he seems to be so over analytical about himself that it comes across as a lot of shame. Like, I think he was feeling aroused at one point during a dinner, and he like thought, God, you can't even like not think of sex right now, you know? But it was like a totally natural bodily reaction that happens to everybody. Um, and there are a bunch of other things. So he kind of gives off like the anti-hero theme. I don't want to say trope because it doesn't follow a specific pattern, and I'm not that well versed in like what all the tropes are. But the anti-hero, it's, you know, the person who's good inside, good to the core, but because of personal issues that they feel like they can't overcome, they can't become the hero that they're supposed to be or that other people expect them to be. There are other types of anti-heroes as well, but this is Tell. This is what I gathered from Tell. And he expects himself to be weak. And then because of that, he wants to like leave his land, or he makes jokes to leave, like he's gonna go get a farm elsewhere, and he's just going to be away from everybody and disappear and just live happily. Like he makes it a point that being king would be or might be an unhappy thing. But then he says other things that, well, if I'm king, I would just like everybody to be happy, you know, so life would be easy. So he kind of gives off weird vibes, but he finds out that he's not going to be king, and all of his friends are pissed, and he almost does not even give a shit. And he's not even worried. He's like, they're worried about his brother, but he's like, oh, don't worry about him. He's a good guy at heart, you know, maybe he needs to be watched a little bit, but he has advisors, blah, blah, blah. And then he has this issue with with the alcohol or coming across as he cares only about drink and sex and not responsibilities. And I just wanted to kind of talk about, like, for people who haven't read the book, I wanted to hear what you had to say about this idea of the failed king and the addiction and the shame feeding into that. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think I know what you're getting at. And you know what? I'm so happy because I can see you kind of like struggling a little bit to contend with Tell, and like that is the goal, right?
Complex.
Yeah, he's a complicated man, and he you know, I never even for 2 seconds had the idea of in my head of him being an anti-hero. I just um I just wanted a flawed hero. He's a flawed person. And the thing about Tell is that he's a really good boy. Like he's a good boy. He has achieved this great thing, for his father. He's ended this long, centuries long, like bloody conflict between his country and another. He's bright. The passage talks about like all this stuff that he has going for him.
He's
Um,
charming.
he's
Like,
charming.
he's
He's great. People love being
lovable.
around him.
Yeah.
He's one of those people. Um, but he does struggle with shame and self-loathing and overthinking and self-doubt and all of that stuff because the addict can never see that the problem is the substance, right? So like addiction makes a complicated person even more complicated, right? It's like you can't even like get your finger on like what is exactly wrong with this guy. And what is wrong with this guy beyond like the human faults and flaws that we all have is that he drinks. Like that there's nothing else, right? So if he removes that one thing from his life, things will get a lot simpler, right? He will see himself for who he is. He'll make better decisions, right? Again, all of his flaws are exasperated by his substance of choice, which happens to be alcohol, right? But remove that, right? And things will clear up. Things will get a lot simpler for you because it's kind of like the difference between embarrassment and shame, right? Like embarrassment is the yucky feelings that we get because we've done something embarrassing. They're about choices we've made, things we've said, stuff that we've done. Shame is not that. Shame is a much stronger, much darker thing. Shame is about who I am in here, and that's where he is, right? Like that's the stuff that is eating at him. So, you know, remove the alcohol, get to see yourself a little bit clearer, get to make slightly better choices, obviously, because when people are intoxicated, they're kind of idiots. Um, but he cannot see it. And like there's 3 books worth of stuff of like, what does that stuff have its root in? You know what I mean? Like he has this magical power that he kind of like has to keep hidden. He has a lot of trauma, a mom and his first boyfriend like dying on the same day, like both drowning, the boyfriend trying to save the mom, the queen. Like, so he's got all of these like reasons to drink. He has all these reasons to be a traumatized person. um but I love you kind of like seeing him and the way that he's thinking about himself in this passage is kind of this like messy thorny thicket, because that's what I wanted. I wanted you to feel like that because when you're in the throes of addiction, that's how it feels. It's like, how can I have all these problems. I don't make good decisions. I let my people down, whether in his case it's like the people of his country, right? But that stuff he's kind of good at. It's his friends, his family. Those are the people he really lets down. But anyways, he's in this thicket, this jungle of like mess and crap and bad feelings and resentments and shame and remorse and all that stuff. But like that's all well and good, buddy. But like what you're not talking about, right? You mention it, you think about it all the time. It's the thirst. And like, how do you eliminate the thirst? You don't drink anymore, you
So
know?
he's not even aware of his drinking problem, but I thought he was.
He is aware that he can't stop drinking, but he conceives it as I can't stop drinking because I've got all this shit. And it's like, no, buddy, you got all this shit because you can't stop drinking, you know? And that is like very sort of like direct from my experience, you know, like I am in recovery in an anonymous 12-step fellowship, right? I wonder what it might be. But when I was attending meetings of this fellowship very early in my sobriety, and someone said to me, you know, or they said to the meeting, you know what I mean? It wasn't necessarily they were talking to me, but they said, you know, you don't have to drink even if you want to. Like even if it that feeling, that thirst is really profound, even if you feel like every cell in your body is driven to do that thing, you don't have to do it. Right? The idea that you do is it's a lie, right? It feels like you do, right? But feelings are real, but they're not reality. There's a difference there. So that's
Temporal.
where he is. He just has the cart before the horse, you know? It's like, how about you just eliminate the substance, right? And then see what's going on with you.
Did
So
I
he's drinking, and it's like that idea of like, well, you would drink too. I have all this stress. I'm a crown prince now, and now it's that's taken away from me, right? So, you know, he is in that same thicket that I hope that the reader is in, trying to be like, what's up here?
well, it's definitely complex, and the way that you I just love the way that you show it. It's real, you know.
Thank you.
Um I guess sometimes I feel like people drink because they're trying to hide a part of themselves that they don't like. So for me, it might be the other way around than what you're saying. Like you're saying the drink itself is the problem. And I agree with that. But I was thinking he's drinking because because he has all this shame, because his, you know, his the like him thinking that he's an asshole because he's a little aroused at a dinner party says a lot to me. Like I just felt that I don't know, this idea of a failed king, there's a lot that can be said with addiction and with that. And like what was your process? Like did you do that on purpose? Did you think how would the addict make a good fantasy character and then think failed royalty? Or did you already have the story like, oh, I have this story about a failed king? And because, I've had issues with alcohol, that would be a good, for character development. Like how did
Hmm,
that process, do those even connect for you? Because they connect for me.
right. Yeah, and I agree with what you said. First of all, just to go back a minute and like, you know, yeah, it's like I say, like it's the alcohol dummy, right? Like that's your problem. But that's like the first step of solving your problems. But so
Right.
long as you have that going on, you're never getting at all that shame. You're
Right.
never getting in the thicket. You are in the thicket, you need to get out of the thicket. Then you can kind of like work your way through, push this over there, look in here, like see what's going on, right? But until that alcohol is removed from the situation, you're never going to see it because you can't see straight, right? Like you're not living straight. Um, as far, I'm trying to like decide, like obviously, I think not obviously, but I for sure the idea that he was going to be like a failure, that he was gonna kind of have this problem, a crown prince who had that taken away from him. I believe that was first, but then my immediate thought is like, well, why, right? And like, I was like, oh, addiction, right? And like, I don't know, I'm like one of these people that I feel like a lot of people's problems like come down to addiction. And I don't mean like, you know, wine and heroin and crystal meth or whatever. I mean, for sure, like obviously, you know, that's a huge problem. But I mean, the mindset, the like mechanism of addiction, I think gets in the way of a lot of people like kind of like having a fulfilling life. Um, and you know, whether that's like, oh, maybe I am addicted to sex, right? Like maybe I use sex to cope with yucky stuff I don't want to deal with. Maybe I am addicted to the approval of others. Maybe I am addicted to work. Maybe, you know, there's like endless options, but I feel like that mechanism shows up in over and over and over again in like people's very human problems. But particularly um, for my first book, you know what I mean? I I thought something that was really accessible to me made sense, because you know I'm just kind of like trying, hopefully like starting to figure out how to be a writer that people might want to read. So I thought that it was smart to just like keep that simple and be like, okay, well, what do you understand? Well, I understand drinking to cover up the tangle of shame and guilt and remorse and all that yucky stuff. So I think that was kind of the order that I made those decisions in.
All right. Well, they always say, you know, write what you know. So
Sure.
that's definitely that was good on your part, especially because it makes it just so real. Like because when you've been through something, you can hit it in a more realistic way. Like there's no going around it. Um, and then Natalie, you're starting to feel bad there.
Mm, just
Natalie, I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. Carry on.
Thank you for like hanging with us so long.
That's all.
Yeah.
I was enjoying.
I was going to ask if you wanted to say anything about addiction from your perspective as a healer, but you don't have to.
No, well, I grew up with a parent with an addiction that eventually killed him. So, do you know what I mean? It was there all the time growing up. Sometimes you just didn't want to go home, especially if you knew certain times of the year or certain things. It never got violent or anything. It was that he would just get stupid and fall asleep. But then it was embarrassing if like mum was out, and the people at work knew he liked to drink, so they'd have their works dinner and they'd all buy him drinks and he would fall asleep in his soup, you know, and they all thought it was funny, and it was like humiliating to my mother. And then I think as it got older, things that, like the factory that he managed closed down. He made rubber. So then at a certain age, it was a bit harder to find work. So all he would do then would be, my mother kicked him out just before their 25th wedding anniversary. And all he was interested in was, oh, can we leave it a couple of weeks so we can have the big party? You know? And then wherever he went to live, he just sat there and all he did was smoke and drink until he ended up having strokes, and then it got multiple organ failure. And I, as the eldest and the next of kin, because my mother had divorced him, I then had to go and sign do not resuscitation. I had to come out of operating theatre that I was working in to go to a different hospital to go and see him, and to sign a do not resuscitate form that even now sometimes makes me feel, and it doesn't matter what anyone says, makes me feel as if I killed my dad, because I signed the do not resuscitate form. And it doesn't matter, I've gone through it myself. I've gone through it when I did my master's in trauma, that I played the patient. So I gave all the information out and had the counselling of highly qualified professionals to cope with my trauma of it. And it still doesn't matter, because I don't care what people say I killed, that's what it makes me feel. From my medical experience, I knew that he wouldn't survive anyway, but it still doesn't. Maybe if I just left it and I didn't have to sign that form and he just died, it would have been easier. I knew the exact moment he died because I felt it. But yeah, so addiction screwed me and my brother up big time. I thought that I'd almost got to the stage. I had an addiction, I suppose it was, to grass. I smoked it from the age of 17, or yeah, about 17. I smoked it every day right up until about 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow, every day?
Every day.
Wow.
Mind you, there was a time when I lived in Egypt, I didn't, because I would have got put in prison and I was diving too much. But when I'm over here, I was, and especially after working at Citizens Advice, I'd go home and the first thing I did was take my coat off, roll up, sit at the back and have a spliff before I even had a shower and got undressed, because the work was that bad. But then a friend of ours died of cancer from smoking. She had a lung removed and then she had half of her brain removed because of it. And I was sat at the back.
Because of pot or cigarettes?
Cigarettes. I was sat at the back having a joint. And it was just in between Christmas and New Year. And I thought, why am I smoking this? Why am I smoking at all? We've just buried our friend who got eaten away within a couple of months. So I had some tobacco there and some grass, and I thought, right, I'm going to roll this. Once I finished all of this, because there was no point leaving anything, because you'd be drawn back to it. Right, once this is all done, I am not going to smoke from that last one. And then I think it was the 4th of January. And I had one and I said to Sue, this is my last one, won't be smoking ever again after this. And I smoked it and I couldn't even smoke it all because I'd made that decision. I didn't have to take any of the stop smoking sprays or anything. I had made that decision over those days and it got into my head. And as soon as I smoked that last one, that was it. I haven't smoked since. I haven't taken any dope since. I haven't, nothing.
And you didn't have any side effects from not smoking?
No.
Wow. That's crazy.
But it's crazy how, because it got to the stage that I was addicted to it. I'd come home, I had to have one. And if I didn't, I was irritable. But the fact was I'd smoked it so long that I'd smoke one and I didn't get stoned anymore.
Right.
So then it was like, well, what's the point of spending all this money on this, smoking this? I'm not enjoying it and it's not doing anything for me. And I could use that money for something else. And yeah. And then again, I think it all coincided with going to the spiritual circle and meditating and stuff like that. And yeah, I say total life change with lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, alcohol is a ruins lives, ruins families, ruins lots of stuff.
Yes.
So
yeah, it does.
I didn't drink for a long time, nor my brother. And then the one day Sue sat me down and she said, "You're not your dad." And I was like, yeah, okay. So then I had gin. But yeah, I don't drink too much. I might drink if we go out for a meal, have a glass of wine. But again, doing Reiki and doing healing, I can't seem to get drunk. Lots of people say that once they learn to do Reiki, it's almost like something happens once you start calling that energy into your body to heal other people and yourself. You just can't seem to get drunk.
Really?
Yeah.
I've gotten, I wouldn't say drunk. I don't get drunk anymore, but I've gotten buzzed for sure.
I drank nearly a bottle of gin. And I used to get, you know, I did get drunk before, but now I just can't seem to get
Same.
drunk.
I mean, I'm only Reiki level 1, but
I'm Reiki master, but do a bit more and do it more often, and you'll find that
I do it every day.
Yeah. What do they say? Spirit and spirit don't mix. That's what I keep getting told. Spirit and spirit don't mix.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Because I have been thinking a lot about addiction lately. And, you know, thinking about your book, first of all, addiction's complicated, you know,
Right.
but to me, it was almost like he was drinking because he had already stopped believing in himself.
Yeah, he feels this certain kind of way about himself. He drinks to cope with it, which causes him to do other things that make him feel a certain kind of way about himself.
Like a cycle.
And then he drinks more, and then other things, and then he drinks more. You know what I mean? It's like this endless cycle. And also, it's almost like he's at that place, and I identify with this for sure. Although I didn't necessarily have this in mind when I was writing this passage in particular, but he's at that place where, like, to know that you're an alcoholic is different from knowing what alcoholism is.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, yeah, I know I can't stop drinking, but like, until you understand the way alcoholism works, you're just like, okay, like, well, how can I drink more reasonably? Like, how can I drink less? And how can I do this? And what if I do it at a different time? Like all those games that people play with themselves in addiction.
Yeah.
And
neuroticism.
But the answer is that, like, simple thing of like, well, you can't. Not at all. You don't even have to think about it. It's just a no, right? So like, get it out of your life, then worry about the other stuff. But, you know, easier said than done, especially in that like shame cycle. It's like a self-perpetuating thing, you know?
Absolutely. Now, so I have my one character, she's an addict. And but in the first book, see, I had originally written one book, but it was really long, and the editor suggested either cutting or splitting it into 2 books.
Gotcha.
So I split it into 2 books. And so I couldn't really have like the major problems with her drinking, and she takes pills as well. I couldn't have like the major problems start happening yet in book 1. But in book 2, they definitely become more apparent. So I have a plan, because I had a struggle. So I have a plan of kind of mimicking my struggle with it throughout the series, and, you know, showing all the stages and everything. And I was wondering, is that what you're doing? Like, is the addiction part of one of the main themes of your series?
Yeah. So, but like almost like the mirror image of that. So like, one thing, there's a lot of portrayal of addiction, I feel like, in fantasy. Maybe less so like queer fantasy. I'm not really sure.
I don't read fantasy either, just
Yeah, gotcha.
get that out of the way.
But like, addiction is not like this thing where like you drink a ton, you're washing pills down, you drink to you know, and you come to this crisis point, whatever that might look like for you, and then you like stop and like, okay, I'm not drinking, I'm not washing pills down my throat anymore, like, okay, all better. Like most people who like find some kind of recovery find that those struggles like continue. That's why, like, you know, at 10 years sober, like you're gonna still see me going to meetings, maybe not as many as I did like my first year, but like I still have to kind of like maintain myself a little bit, because, you know, if we are to believe that addiction is a disease, which I tend to believe the disease model, you know, and that it's born out of something other than the physical addiction, like physical chemical addiction, right? If that were the only thing at play, then like people would go to rehab once and they'd, you know, stop for 30 days because they didn't drink there, and then no one would ever relapse again because they broke the physical thing, right? So we know that because people go back to alcohol, heroin, whatever it is, over and over and over again, that there's something else other than the physical at play, right? There's some mental stuff. Some people would argue there's some spiritual stuff going on there. And like, so like, how do we deal with that stuff so that we don't go back to whatever our crutch was, you know? But anyways, you know, there's kind of like 3 books, and you know, uh, not to spoil too much, I will say it, like Tell gets a handle on his drinking, like he stops drinking in this first book. But like, what is his recovery like, right, as it goes on for years, you know? And the second book is some years later, and the third book is kind of like right after that second one. But like, what does it look like for him to be a man who put down his crutch so that he could, number one, like be a happier person, and number two, like do all this awesome shit that a magical prince has to do, right? To take care of like the bigger like conflict in the book. um, and what does that look like as new problems come up, as time goes by, as there's loss and gain and tragedy and, you know, awesome stuff, like what does that look like for someone? Because a lot of that storytelling that I've experienced in fantasy that has that theme of addiction, it's like they have an addiction and then they stop and like everything's better, and it's like, yeah, but I want to know about year 5, right? Like,
Yeah, I wanted to do the same thing where I show like the struggle just begins after you detox.
exactly. Right.
uh yeah. So, and coming to that point of detoxing is super hard, you know.
Yeah.
And then to find out, yeah, like you said, it's not done.
Not by any stretch. And actually, one of my favorite chunks of the book is when he finally does kind of stop drinking in that first like handful of days, when he is like, his bones are chattering out of his skin. He's literally hallucinating. Like he has a bit of a hard time for a while, for sure.
Alcohol is crazy.
It is, they say, you know, detox from alcohol and benzodiazepines will kill you. The other ones might feel like you're going to die, but you can actually die from alcohol and benzos.
Yes, you can.
So out there in TV land, if you do get sober, ask for help, because if it's from alcohol, you might need a little medical supervision so you don't,
Yes.
Die.
Yeah, you can have like a seizure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the scariest times in my life. And when you have an experience like that, you want to share, like you feel strongly about it. And so I'm glad that you're going to be showing that in your book as well.
Yeah.
I think that does need to be shown more. And we have different genres, So
Right. Yeah. Different kinds of readers like coming across it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And believe me, like after Tell, I am not done with addiction. There's no way. It's so rich. You know, it's back to that like complicatedness that we were talking. Like you can't even talk about it. You know what I mean? Like how do I view addiction and recovery? Like Jesus, I could talk about it for 10 years and you wouldn't be able to make heads or tails of it, you know?
Right. And also me personally, I don't even understand it, the whole thing. So, you think one thing for a while and then 5 years later you realize, oh my God. Or like I don't know if I might edit some of this out just so you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, sure. Yeah. Do what you do. Do your magic.
I don't know how much of this I want to
Sure.
relay, but I didn't think I was an addict, okay? And I had gotten over drinking and I realized I was replacing it with other things that weren't illegal or, you know, deathly dangerous. But I still was going through that cycle. I found myself in a cycle of needing these things,
Yeah.
even if it's like what you say, caffeine or this shit, like
Yeah.
you feel uncomfortable if you don't have it. And it just hit me recently, um, literally this past year, that I'm probably an addict. Like I probably have whatever that physical thing is that makes me seek outside of myself comfort and safety and warmth,
Right.
and because I can't, and I meditate every day. Like I was saying before, I do Reiki on myself every day. I mean, yeah, do I miss a day here and there? Yes. But
Of course.
what I'm saying is it's part of my daily routine. I don't drink, I don't get high, and it's like a year later of not of thinking I'm done with everything, and I'm just realizing I'm starting to think about it again, like
Right.
it it's bothering me again. What the fuck is that? Like
Crazy, right? Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
crazy, like has a hold on you and it feels like a curse. And that is definitely not discussed in any books that I've read. It's always like, when they're going through the thing. I read a lot of classic fiction mostly
Hmm.
anyway, so I don't even know like what's out
Like
there
out
right
there.
now,
Yeah.
which is probably really bad. But I can't help it. Like when I want to read something that is, great
Yeah.
or like noteworthy, but anyway, or I read history. I love history. So yeah, I've come across, the books, the Jack Kerouac and Ginsberg, and Bukowski, like it's all about being fucked up and
Right.
getting the drugs, and then fucking everything up way beyond anybody's boundaries.
Right.
And then that's the end of the book,
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, what happens after the person says, okay, I am, they first they have to say I am done, and then they have to detox. And
Right.
then what happens after detox? Like, do
Right.
people realize that?
It's like, yeah, you have that physical horror show of like detoxing. And then you think, well, now I can deal with my feelings. And it's like, yeah, but no, now your brain has to put itself back to, like, literally has to like, remap itself, and like it's just wild. And then maybe like later in coming years you can get to all the feeling stuff. It's just, it is a ride. It takes a while.
It's a lifelong battle, dude. Yeah, because after detox, it's going to take you like a year for your brain to get back to normal. And during that year, and who has time for that in this world? we have to go to work. We have, you know, if I had children, we have children to take care of. We've
Right.
got, you know,
I have
I've got
novels to write. Like,
novels to write. I've got to pay my bills, you know, and like I can't be depressed in bed for a year, you know,
Right.
like crying for seemingly no reason. And then when that's over, then start getting into like the deeper shit. Like, who has time for that in this life? Like rich people, I guess. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
I don't fucking know.
There
So
are literally only 24 hours in a day. Like it's not enough for me, like especially as someone who has a day job and is trying to be a writer,
yeah.
you know, it's let alone, you know, do the stuff that I have to do to take care of myself, like as a person with a substance use disorder, you know, like in remission or no, like it still takes some ongoing maintenance, you know.
Yeah, like do you take supplements and stuff?
I take an antidepressant because I need one very badly. And actually, what's interesting about that is that it wasn't until I was 5 or 6 years sober that I was like, and I stumbled on it accidentally because I took something to help me stop smoking and it worked really well. And then I went back to my doctor and I was like, it was like the dead of winter, like probably this exact time of year. And like my depression definitely has seasonal features to it. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to jump off a bridge this year. Do you think it might be that pill you're giving me? So I'm very lucky in that I did stumble into that like pharmacological help by accident. I know so many people have to like play with dosing and different medications and stuff, but it's a big help to me. I guess like vitamin D, I do take a little vitamin D for the sun, and that's like good for mood too. So, you know, that is one way that I kind of help myself take care of myself, help me take care of me. Exercise, huge.
Yeah,
Like,
that's one thing I have to do because working from home, it's like what I'm literally sitting in front of a computer plus writing plus doing this show. Like I'm literally doing nothing but sitting in front of the computer. But yeah, the addiction thing is huge. And I'm glad that what you're doing in your trilogy with addiction, showing it. And I think we need more books about that, really, because people, especially people who never had a problem, they don't understand at all. It's like super hard for them to grasp. And maybe it could help, you know, some young people think twice before doing something. You never know, but
I mean, it is, I think, hard for outsiders to understand like that something could get its hooks in your thinking so deeply that that thing that I said earlier, where literally when someone said you don't have to drink even if you want to, like I was like bowled over by that very simple, very obvious fact, you know. But you know, people that haven't dealt with it don't know that it really does mess your thinking up that much,
yeah,
where you think, no, 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 if I don't have this, I'm going to die.
yes, like I'm gonna die. It hurts
Yeah.
unless I have it.
It hurts, like living hurts. Yeah.
All right. So, one thing I noticed about your book um, was just the tone and the language,
Hmm.
like the way you wrote it. It does have a sort of minimalism, which I think you had mentioned that you were going for. So I think that was a nice job. Um, how did you prepare for like the language of this novel? Because it's not like okay, like Natalie, her book is very conversational and it's basically, you know, her just talking, right?
Right.
And the narrator talking to the reader and it's very natural to her. But this isn't this is a definite voice and tone that you have to like channel.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know, like, did you do anything to prepare for that? Like, you said you read a lot of fantasy, so maybe you're already halfway there.
Yeah, I think some of it is from reading fantasy for sure, or just reading other stuff. But it's like I didn't have to prepare other than like making the decision of like, okay, what are we doing for point of view? What are we doing for perspective? What are we doing for like what makes sense for this story for voice and tone and diction and syntax and like all that stuff. And what I thought would be interesting is to build a little separation from tell, which is why it's not first person, even though our narrator very much can see inside of Tell's head and can only see inside of Tell's head. So it's third person and very tight, right? Like if you are in this trilogy, you are with Tell. And
Yeah.
if something happens to Tell that is not something that happens in the presence of Tell, well, you're with Tell. So you're going to miss it too. And that becomes very important, like later on in this first book, where something happens and you're like, what? And it's like,
Well,
yeah,
sorry.
what's that?
I was gonna say it's already important because he just found out that he's not gonna be king,
Right,
that right
exactly.
there. It's like, what the fuck happened there? What I wonder what that
Exactly.
conversation was like,
So I think that lends itself to sort of feeling a little bit like you are with him in that like confused, like alcohol days, like strange, like headspace. And also I think it serves the story in some other ways. So there's that decision, and then there's the decision of, so like, another, a kind of detachment that I didn't want was between the reader and the world, right? So like I want the books to feel very real and very of a world and very of a time. And that feeling and world and time is like, it's high fantasy. So it's one I totally pulled out of my ass, basically, like I made it up. And so I didn't want the voice to seem too modern. I didn't want any irony there. You know what I mean? Like I thought that would help the reader invest a little bit deeper in the reality and just kind of like go with it a little bit more. I'm trying to think of a book example. Oh, a movie example. A Knight's Tale. I didn't want that, right? Like I don't know if you saw it, but it's like this retelling of this Chaucer stuff and blah 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 blah, but it's like got a kind of like screwy, like modern
Yeah, is it like,
take on it.
it's goofy.
Yeah, it's like goofy. And that's not to slag that off. I
Right.
love that stuff. You know what I mean? I just didn't think it would necessarily serve this story very well.
It's
You
not
know
for
what I
you.
mean?
It's not the story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, I don't want readers, I want readers to comment on the story. I don't want to comment on the story for them too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to be with Tell. Like I want you to be with Tell, to be in his head and nowhere else. And, the language is, it probably comes off a little bit stilted and a little bit old fashioned. And, that's the way Tell thinks, and over the course of the trilogy, the prose does kind of like get a little bit airier as Tell gets a little bit airier. As Tell changes, the tone and the voice hopefully change a little bit, which is really hard. It's like,
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound easy.
yeah, it's one of the hardest parts. And it's subtle, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think because it's subtle, or hopefully a lot of it's subtle, some of it is pretty clear, I think. But because a lot of it is subtle, I think it makes it a little bit more of a challenge from the writer's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. What is high fantasy?
So, I mean, there's no like universal precise agreement on this stuff. I mean, you want to start a fight on Twitter, like say something firm about genre or subgenre. And your Twitter will light up like a Christmas tree. But high fantasy, the way I conceive of it, is just that it is a made up world, right? Like it is a fantastical place. It is a place that is not totally based in our reality, where, you know, in contrast, low fantasy is more like the fantastical and the magical like intrudes on our world.
Oh, okay.
But this is like, this might as well be a different planet, right? Like
Yeah.
there's magic, there's 6 different races of people in 6 different countries. There's, each one of those places has a religion and all that stuff. So you know, high fantasy, what I love about it is that because of that fact, because it is all up to me, and because there are plenty of blank spots, like I made myself a sandbox just with this one world. Like I can
Yeah.
always come back here and play. You know, by the time I put this to bed in June and do a little promo or whatever, I will definitely want a break from Tell and Faye and Omella and all of their damn problems, you know, but it is somewhere I can come back to. So that's how I conceive of high fantasy versus low.
Okay. That makes sense. And you know, I'm a little jealous of you guys because I do historical stuff, and half of it is research. Like half of the fucking writing is research, you know, just to make sure that it's believable that you're in the 1920s, you know.
Right. Yeah,
So,
like you have something to answer. You have to answer to reality in your
yes,
book. Like certain things happened in certain ways in the 20s, and like
I
if
can't
you want
pretend they
any,
didn't.
right, if you want any credibility, you're going to have to like adhere to that somewhat.
Right. Yeah. And I am trying to be as close to reality as possible. So,
And, you know, writing fantasy, what happens, and this certainly, like there are fantasy writers that are very research heavy and they try to, you know, to include a lot of that detail about like what is the technology, like where are they at. And I write that way. Like I remember I did for the first book, like I did so much research on the prince's damn ship and exactly how big it was, you know what I mean, like what was like realistic, you know. And especially that first book, so much stuff that I just ended up chucking because I don't really care. Like it kind of like bores me a little bit. You know, I am like so much more invested in character, at least this go round. So I just kind of, you know, it's like it's generally middles ages ish, but like what does that mean, especially on a completely different world, you know?
right.
So I am learning not to get bogged down in that because it's just not efficient because I'll end up cutting it. It's like, no, get back to the story, get back to the story.
Yeah. No, I think you did a good job with it. When I'm reading it, I'm there, you know. I think that's what you want.
That's what I want, exactly.
Um,
That and being totally confounded by Tell.
yeah. Well, I feel like I understand him though, because I had sort of lived that life, but he is, it's hard to explain at the same time. It's hard to
Mhm.
explain him, but there's just something about the way he thinks that I, you know, vibrate with, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice job.
thank you.
I also wanted to know like what attracts you to stags.
Oh, well, I mean, they are just kind of like awesome to look at. Like this beautiful animal with a
They
big
are.
giant set of antlers is just like wow. But like it, you know, it's just there's so much like mythology around them and symbolism. It's just so rich that it's just so easy to just steal stuff, you know, like, you know, um Cernunnos like is this very like one of the oldest gods in like human history, and it's this like god of the wild, god of the wood. Like he's kind of half man, he has antlers, you know, sometimes he's like more stag than man, sometimes he's more man than stag. But you know, the fawn Pan, the horned god, like this idea of like this kind of like masculine deity from the woods with like horns or whatever is like very, very old. And that the stag and the doe are the main deities in Fae. And so, and like they have tied, I think, to invest the monarchy with like power and awe and all that stuff for the people, like they've tied a lot of that deer symbolism into the castle, the way that they dress. The crown is that the king or the queen would wear is like literally, like it literally has like actual antlers that have been around for 2,000 years or whatever. So I think it's cool. Hopefully it feels plausible because it is based on ideas about religion and spirituality that humans have been to before, and continue to be at.
I mean, I'm not super far into it, but it totally made sense to me. Like the lore and the ritual thing that he does in the beginning for what is it, Hod and Fjord?
Yeah, his dead boyfriend and mother.
I assume that's gonna be explained a little more at some point, or
yeah, or for sure you will see it reappear, and maybe for different people too.
yeah.
But yeah, there's like that kind of gets like teased out, that stuff, and hopefully you get a picture of it's a highly ritualized religion for sure.
Yeah.
Which is why Cape is so pissed off at him that he's like spaced this thing. Like, no, like it is, if you take that responsibility to remember the dead, you better do it. You know what I mean? You better take it seriously. So I love how mad she is at him that he's just, come on, bro. Like you have to remember our friend and your mom.
How could he forget?
I think that Tell is a person that is grieving before his father dies, because his trauma, one of the big reasons that he's drinking is that, he lost these two very important people in a very tragic and very sudden and very unexpected way, right? Has he ever processed that? It sounds like from the passage that I read, maybe not, because he and his father pretty quickly took to drinking over it, right? Just Tell ran with that a little bit more than it sounds like Dad did. So he's got this grief in the background that he hasn't like dealt with already, right? He also has been working at this thing for his father, and you can sort of imagine that his father was like, take this project, you know what I mean? At least it will like give you something to do instead of just wailing over your dead mother and your dead boyfriend. Take this project. And he's worked on it and he's done well for 20 years and it's like coming to fruition. So he's grieving that, right? It's like a big transition, the central part of his, I don't know, like princely professional life or whatever is coming to an end. So he's grieving about that. And then he's grieving, he finds out his father dies. He's got to grieve that. He finds out he won't be king. He has to grieve that. And so, it just doesn't stay in his mind because he's just overwhelmed with it.
It's clear that he's a mess.
He's a mess. A hot mess.
Like to forget something like that.
Because he wouldn't, right? Because he's deeply religious. Like he deeply believes in this stuff. And that's very clear, hopefully from the second chapter, where at that treaty signing, he basically relays the whole Genesis story of his religion, right? The whole creation story. So
from memory,
yeah, from memory, exactly. So you can understand why Cape's like, what the fuck? Like, how are you not remembering this? And I love that you're asking the question too. It's like, yeah, exactly. He's a mess.
Excellent job. I'm excited to finish it.
I hope you get a chance to. I'm going to have to pick up yours. I will get to do so soon, I think, because I just gotten through a bunch of reading that I felt like I needed to do.
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah.
Because so I had published this in March of last year, And over the course of talking to other authors and stuff, I've learned that a lot of authors, they publish it, like self-publish, but then they like continue to change it. Is that something that you've done? Because I didn't even think of that, first of all. And second of all, now I am thinking maybe I should clean it up a little bit, because
Yeah, let's see. I know that there is kind of an error about naming someone in the first book, and there are obviously like some typos that got through and stuff like that that I'm aware of, but I'm going to wait until I'm all done and I'm going to go and clean that stuff up for sure. But I don't want to change anything kind of like materially about the book. Like I'm not,
well,
that doesn't hold much appeal for me, even if I probably would have told some of the story a little bit differently.
right. I'm only
what I
going
know
to add a couple scenes and then like clean up short, like trim some things that I rambled on too long about, blah, 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 you know?
Oh, isn't it fun when you discover some? I mean, sure, probably less fun if it's like already published, but it's just nice when you're like, I don't need that. Like, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like masturbating, essentially. Like, this does not serve the, like, get it out of here. I
Well,
love that feeling.
I think a lot of it is from, especially in the first half of my book, is it's older, first of all, right?
Right.
And it's just me literally doing so much research that I'm putting all of my research in there, but really it doesn't have to be in there.
It's like my stuff with the damn ship.
Right, exactly.
Like,
I
I'm like,
totally,
what is this doing? Like, what is
that's-
this doing for me? You know, what is, and more importantly, what is it doing for a reader?
and for the story, yeah,
Right.
like, is it serving a purpose? And that sucks because there's okay, there are a couple scenes that I am not getting rid of because I want to pay homage to some people in history that have been forgotten. And even if they don't have like a super huge purpose, they're staying.
Right. Because I want them to.
Because I want them to stay.
Mhm.
But yeah, like a couple, I've gotten quite a few reviews like saying it like slows down at some point, and even a couple people who really liked the story, uh she said it gets a little repetitive at one point, and I almost want to like I almost want to ask and be like, can you like point out, because I'm, you know how as authors we get so close to our work that we can't see it the way other people can see it because we've been fucking looking at it forever.
Yeah, exactly. I've read the thing 87 times. Like, how,
Exactly.
yeah.
So I still wonder if I'm just a little too close, even though I haven't read it in like almost a year. I still wonder if I'm a little too close to be able to make that call myself. But I do remember right before publishing, I remember thinking like, this is slow. This is too slow right here. But I asked my editor and she was like, don't touch it. So I was like, all
Right.
right, I'm not going to touch it. And I think that's the part where, so basically if you're going to get the book, I'm wondering if you should just wait. I don't know.
Your call.
I'm also
I
gonna
love that you're going to do it though if you feel like it needs to be done. Like, I'm not anti that at all. It's just like I can't, and like I said, maybe I will change my mind about this, but like it'd be really hard to go back, and I'd probably want to strip the whole thing down, honestly, because you know, I can't separate entirely, like you said, but like having had some time away from it, like I can. That's like I'm a draft rester, right? Like I finish it and I'm like, get out of my life for a month and a half. Like I cannot look at you, you know. But it just goes back to that thing I said earlier about like independent publishing.
Well,
Really, is that what we're calling it? Because like you can't, because you get to that point you're describing where you can't even see it. You can't even see it.
right, yeah. Well, yeah. But you know what people mean by it, and that's what they call it. So it's like,
Yeah.
what am I gonna call it?
God.
Um, like small social circle publishing.
Right, exactly. Small press, and then there's tiny press, and then there's me.
Super tiny press.
Yeah, exactly.
There is the trap though, of, because a piece of work can be edited forever, so there's that trap of going back and fixing things, and oh, I gotta change this now, and getting stuck in that cycle, whereas I really would just like to move forward. But I'm on my second draft, sorry, for my second book. I still haven't quite finished the first draft yet. And I've had writer's block, like nothing's coming to me right now, or like that inspiration, and so I'm starting to think maybe I need to fix a couple things in the first one, and that'll help bring the second one out.
Yeah, it might just jog something anyways, you know what I mean?
Right. But I don't want to be that writer that is consistently like changing their work because one person said this, or
Yeah, I think that there's value to, and for your own sanity, you gotta like at a certain point you have to be like, this is what I made you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like you can take it or leave it, like, but this is what I got. And the great thing is, there is a second and a third and a 20th book if that's what you want to do. And and like pretty much as long as you can sit upright, you can write.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not one of those people that's like, I don't want to live to be 100. I would love to live to be 100, but I hope I can write the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be cool.
It would be, right?
Yeah, if I didn't have my faculties, I would be very sad.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not into
Quite
that.
sad. If you do get my book, tell me when it gets slow.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on it for you, for sure.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Like, I can't, everything that's in there makes sense for the story later on. So I can't take out anything. I can trim, which I plan on doing. But really, I just want to pick up the pace by adding a couple scenes.
And sometimes you can, right? Like, that's an interesting thing where your first instinct when you're thinking about pace, like, oh, this is draggy, is like, I need to remove things. And that's not what pace is, right? Because like, it's not about having a short book,
Right.
telling a short story, right? It's about like, how does it feel? So sometimes, sometimes you make things faster by adding to them,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah, like if I put a little, because there's a conflict that I don't show, but I allude to it. But now I'm thinking maybe I should show it because maybe it'll pick up the pace a little bit.
yeah, you can play with it a little bit. And oh God, like the off the page stuff it's murder. It really is like that. I did myself a good one by choosing the kind of third person that I did. Yeah, I really did. But at the same time, like now I'm like, oh, I want to do it more with like different stories. My next after this third is going to be a standalone, and I'm almost 100% sure it's going to be first person. But after that, I might come back to this like, no, we're going to hang out with one person really close. And I think that is not for every reader, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like first person novels can be easier to write. Because you are, the voice is the voice of the character,
right?
And you don't have to, you can't show anything that the character doesn't see, and it's easy to, when you're them, to like go on a tangent about their opinion about something. But yeah, whenever I write in first person, it always ends up sounding like it's a psychopath. Like I just get carried away. Like
Yeah.
it turns into like a crazy fucking person. So I don't know what that says about me, but
No comment. No, I'm
it
just
is
kidding.
what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah,
Third.
it is great though. You're so right about first person. It's like you know exactly who you are. And like I know who the narrator is, and I'm never telling anybody, and I hope that people guess, but the narrator of my book is a person in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not saying who. That's for me. That's for me.
I have no idea.
It's hard because like it's a person that isn't like really super in the story, so it kind of comes back to that same struggle of like, well, who is this person then? That, you know, like at least like you said, first person, you're like, you have a fully fleshed character. Now, can they see everything about themselves? Of course not, you know.
Yeah.
Like that's not how we work, right? Otherwise
Right.
we would be less crazy, I guess. Maybe,
Maybe.
perhaps.